Part two. Okay, so you get your buyer's offer. Now the negotiation starts, right? So, man, you just have to sort of decide. I think that probably the easiest thing to do maybe before you start reviewing offers would be to take a little bit of time and sort of write down where you stand, right? Like, what are your must-haves in the ideal offer? That way, when you get an offer, you can maybe evaluate it a little bit more rationally, right? Because sometimes these offers, they come in and they're crazy, and maybe, this is maybe a home that you've lived in for 20 years, and maybe the offer isn't what you wanted it to be. And, at that moment, what you really need to do is not lose your mind. You need to keep your mind and stay nice and cool and figure out how you're going to respond. And so I think if you have that sort of list of must-haves and ideal conditions, it's going to just be a little bit easier to do that. So, and I would think of it in a lot of terms, right? Because there's a lot of parts to the contract. You're going to have, what kind of financing do they have? Have you contacted that lender to make sure that they're actually pre-approved and can close? When are they closing? What's the closing date? How much earnest money are they doing? What are the terms of their inspection? How long are they going to inspect? What kind of time period do they get for that? What happens if they find something that's damaged and they want you to fix it? There's like a whole bunch of pieces. We haven't even mentioned purchase price. So then you got purchase price in there. Usually in state standard contracts, we may have something that discusses like what's going on with the title. There could be a lot of other things, like this buyer could maybe have to sell their house first, so they could be contingent. They maybe could have their house like already sold, but waiting for it to close. They could ask for closing costs. I think there are a lot of sort of mechanics to this. And so I would, kind of go down the list of all these different pieces and just sort of figure out where you stand on it, right? Sometimes you get the perfect offer. Someone comes in, they don't want to do an inspection. They just want to buy it. They want to give you your asking price. They don't want to ask for closing costs. That happens, but I would say that arguably two things. One, I think that's rare. Two, I think that most buyers that are going to approach a for sale by owner are looking for a deal. Okay, so if I were a for sale by owner kind of going into this, just to be like straight up, like I would expect to get like a lot of like weird calls from, unqualified buyers. So these are like, neighbor Steve or whatever, or Connie, who's like, hey, blah, 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 I really want to buy your house, but, I got to get my blah, blah, blah settlement. I don't know, BS. They're not pre-approved. They haven't talked to a lender. They don't, we don't even know if they can buy your house, basically. So I would expect that kind of thing. And I would expect investors to come by, and buyers that are wanting to get a deal. Like I've had buyers contact me and say, hey, I bought a house from a for sale by owner 20 years ago and I got a pretty good deal. Do you think I could do it again? This is the thing. That's what they're looking for. And I think you'll just have to be kind of strong in your negotiation, especially if you've done a really good job up to this point. Like, you've done a really good job with pricing. You've done a good job with your fixes. You've done a really good job with positioning. So, your house is like, showing up online and in person the best that it can, like to what your intention is. So like if you intend it to market it as a fixer, it looks like a fixer. If you intended it to be like fully done, then it's fully done, right? So like, figuring out who you want to try to like target the most. So if you're showing up really well, I would still expect to get randos. I'm not even sure. Yeah, I should probably just put my house on for sale by owner and just sort of see what kind of random calls I get. I just can imagine, like I've talked to several people that are selling their homes on their own, and that's the kind of thing that they get. You know, they get like these weird phone calls. So needless to say, having your points of negotiation kind of outlined and figuring out where you want to be, ideal. Right? Because you want to be able to qualify your buyer, especially if they're getting financing, because you know what you don't want to do? You don't want to get into contract with somebody who says, hey, we're going to close on whatever, January 31st. And then January 31st comes around and you find out that they haven't even sent their paperwork to their banker to get their loan. Yeah, I mean, dude, how disappointing and freaking whack, okay? So, you know, you really want to make sure that whoever you're working with to buy it is like actually qualified and intends to move forward, right? So, you know, you don't have like, unless you use the state standard contracts, you don't really have that protection, right? Like there are pieces of the state standard contract that actually say like, if this buyer is not doing what they need to do in order to move this transaction forward, you can get out of the contract, okay? You know, but if you guys write it on the back of a napkin, you probably don't have a provision like that. So, I mean, you know, you're just kind of in a bit of a weird spot. So, okay. That's kind of what I want to say. You want to make sure that you have your points of negotiation. You want to make sure that whatever offer you decide to go with, you want to make sure that person is qualified. So I would highly recommend getting their pre-approval letter. I would get a phone call with that lender. I would, you know, I mean, it doesn't have to be in depth, but I mean, you should find out, like, are they real? Like, can they actually buy it? Like, all those things. Yeah. And then move forward from there. I mean, I think a lot of it is just sort of, I don't really want to use middle ground because I don't know that that's necessarily the goal, but I think that you want to have a conversation and a dialogue with the buyer that helps you arrive at what you wish to achieve. So selling your house in this time frame for this price, and, you know, and just getting as close to that as you possibly can. Yeah. Yeah. So that is negotiation and contracts part 2 done. Please like the video, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you again soon, YouTube.